So I made a video yesterday about what was it about? So I made a video yesterday about remembering and aphantasia and SDAM and HSAM. So different levels of autobiographical memory and a realization that I had had in regards to a habit of not really wanting to remember the past with the tools that I did have at my disposal. And I was fasting, and as usual, it was a extemporaneous speech, if you will. And so there's definitely things that I could have said more clearly. But one of the things that came to my mind was a short, hopefully short and easy tip that might help you when you are actually using your quote-unquote tools to look back into the past. And by tools, I mean whether they're journal entries, photos, videos, voice memos. In this case, I'm just going to share one tip, and it has to do with when looking at photos. I believe that for myself and probably many others, that we have been conditioned by the digital age, if you will, an age in which we experience digital photos becoming ubiquitous and mainstream. I remember when I was a kid and you had to use film, and so you had to get the film developed, and you could only have a certain number of shots that you could take, and then you had to go and wait. And so photos were physical things, and they were not in such of the abundance was not anywhere near, as far as you can have I have literally thousands of photos on my phone. And so number one, we take them for granted. We take so many that it's like, I think there's a tendency to not really go back and look at them. Add on top of that just the information overload from emails, from social media notifications and posts of all the different platforms. If you use some sort of messaging platform for work like Slack or Discord, there's just the amount of novelty and the different hooks and strategies that companies and people use to get you looking at their information to buy or do something with it. It's really absurd. And so I think our attention spans are dropping, as there's just so much to look at. Netflix, you can just scroll and watch, and things nonstop, which is a topic I think for another day in regards to old time storytelling. Like, you're generating the images, someone is generating the images. We are taking in so much imagery in a we're kind of like gobbling down the food without chewing it and really tasting it, because there's just so much, and it's just sugary, high fat, junk food type information oftentimes. And then that includes, perhaps the greatest example of that is porn. And it's just designed to activate our desire and reward pathways. With all that said, I believe it has created within me, and perhaps many others, the tendency to only look at things on a surface level, just enough at least for my neurotype, if you will, just enough to understand what's there, to kind of shrink it down and be like, okay, that's a picture of a dog, that's a picture of a dog with a leash, and immediately dismiss what I'm looking at. In that way, I've kind of trained myself, or been trained, to not really look at the whole image, number one, but also not pay attention to the details, to not look at and observe the textures and the colors and the shapes, and to like really look at it, because there's just so much. So it's just like, look at that one, move to the next, look at that one, move to the next. It's like swipe left, swipe right, swipe up, swipe down, and just keep moving and moving and looking and looking. And and I work in web development, and so even more so, it's like you're just trying to get to the information you need to solve a problem. You're not looking at the page. And that's actually how, not that we necessarily do this anymore, that's how we used to read, quote unquote, read web pages. For most websites, people aren't actually like reading your content. That depends on what type of content you had, but people are scanning. They're just looking for, they're looking for information. They're looking for signals of trust that, okay, I can trust this thing. There's a great review. It feels good. I'm going to buy this thing now. But they're not necessarily reading all your words on your website. It's just a scanning mode. And so being in that scanning mode, due to my, living in this age and, my habits, I feel like has been detrimental for various reasons. And one of the reasons in regards to looking at old photos is that you're only using the left mind. And that is, I'm not engaging the artist mind, the right mind, the sensory mind. I'm only looking at, okay, this is a picture of me, and this was when I was there, and it's a very dry, sterile, just let me understand what's happening. Is there any significance to what I'm trying to do right now? It's a very functional approach to looking at photos. And of course, this tip, if you will, can be applied to how you observe on an everyday basis in the present, not just looking back at photos. But I know people with SDAM, severely deficient autobiographical memory, including myself, have expressed like looking at a photo and not remembering that they were even there or that event ever took place. And I've experienced that to some degree, especially in regards to like, not necessarily like when I see a photo, I can kind of be like, okay, I can figure it out. And it's like, yeah, cognitively, semantically, I can remember that this must have been at this time. I may not have any actual memories with regards to that event or how it felt. That's how it's typically been. But by changing how we look at the photo, we can basically employ sensory thought. And hopefully, if you're like me, you'll find that you will then have a key to unlock those memories, and things about that event will start to come back, including emotional states and nostalgia and longing, and just also you'll remember more about it. So when you're looking at a photo, don't just look at it to understand that there are like, oh, there's me and there's 3 other people, and then just look at the next one. Take some time, like maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes, and actually notice the colors. Try to think about, without words, what it would feel like to touch the carpet in the photo. Like look at the details of the carpet. Also look in the background. Look at all the little things, not necessarily the main focus, because I have found that I will just look at like the person in the photo, or if it's just me, or I won't even like really look at them. But if I am going to look at something, it'll be looking at the person, like the main, character, if you will, which is a different way of looking at things. I remember taking a culture class years ago when I was about to go to India. I think that's when it was anyways. And the point was that we look at things differently across cultures and regions as well. Whereas like in the Western, like United States, we may look at the main character in the foreground, and then like maybe look at the background. Whereas in and that's in individualistic cultures and societies. Whereas in areas where they're more collective and more concerned about the group, they'll tend to look at what's in the background and all around, and then finally come and look at what's in the foreground. And so if for me, I have that tendency to just look at like what's the main thing in the foreground and not pay attention to all that's surrounding. Like my exercise would be, okay, I want to look at what's around. So it's not just like sensory details, but also the whole thing, like looking at the gestalt, looking at how things relate to one another. I think all of that is helpful, but for me, the most helpful thing is to take time, number one, as I mentioned, and really sit with an image, not just like look at the next one and like discard it, but to look at it, perhaps like take some breaths and relax and try to get your brain into those brainwave patterns, like getting them into a relaxed state. I won't go into like why, but try to do that. Breathe, just when you're maybe before bed, but not when you're too tired, but when you're relaxed, maybe you have a cup of tea, look at a photo, and just really look at the sensory details, look at the colors, notice and maybe think about how the shade of something or the hue of something is different than something else in the picture. Imagine, like I mentioned, if there's a rug or a carpet, look at and try to think about what would it feel like to touch. Like for example, there was a photo I have on my phone of my kids, and there's a red carpet there, and it has like little indentations, like stripes, like every 12 inches or so, like a little groove in it. And as I thought about that in a sensory way, with the groove, it brought up a memory that, oh yeah, I remember when I had to like vacuum that rug, like those little grooves were something I noticed because I'd have to vacuum a little extra to get the things that would fall in between. That's just one example. It's not really a big, significant, like important thing, but it did allow like me to access other things that were connected to those sensory details. And that's something that I would not have remembered unless I had done that practice of like really looking at the color, soaking it in, paying attention to the little details, the little ridges. Just using that photo as an example of my kids as toddlers and young children, looking at their composition, like kind of feeling the chubbiness of them, of their hands, of their toes, of their fingers, and really, imagining. And you don't have to visualize, but you can imagine perhaps like, or maybe you can't, but try to think about if that baby or child was here and you touched them, can you try to recall what it would feel like? Like, would it feel hard like touching a rock? Or would it feel soft like a pillow? Would it feel warm like skin and a body, And just by thinking about holding the hand and noticing the hand in the photo, that can bring up other memories. And that's how it works, is when you use sensory thought and not just words and not just like quickly scanning through things. When you look at things, maybe there's a drink in the photo, and you try to think about, what does this drink taste like? What is this? I'm going to use some junk food examples here, but what does Sprite taste like compared to kombucha? And in this picture, there's Sprite, and you might think, oh yeah, back then I used to drink a lot of that. And you might have some nostalgia, or you might have some like aversion, like, oh, that's so disgusting. So that's it. Just using sensory thought, slowing down, looking at a photo, observing the details, and see if that brings memories and allows you to connect and feel emotionally connected. And perhaps then it might actually, you might be surprised to learn that, hey, I do remember being in this and I remember where I was at. Hopefully that's something that you can experience. It may take some practice with sensory thought in general, and there's some great posts on the Cure Aphantasia Reddit about sensory thought. Basically, it's thinking without words about you want to engage the right brain, the right hemisphere type thinking, and you present your mind with a task that you can't answer in words or in language, which is, for most people, it's the left hemisphere, it's the left brain. Try to think about something that is so specific that it can only be answered by a nonverbal remembering of a sense, of a temperature, of a color. So that's sensory thought. If you practice that, there are other paths and doors that open up, because as I believe, and I think others have come to see, like, that's the basis, and that's like essential, like the first step in learning how to visualize and how to connect to like re-experience and access those memories. So yeah, that's the tip. I may have some more in regards to memories, and it may be in regards to journaling. So stay tuned for stay tuned for more. Yeah, that's all. All right, take care.